I'm being judged by a human court right now. And I'm being judged by many of the membership in the church. And as I was saying before we started this Bible study, there is a tendency of God's own people in the church to want to judge their own leaders. They want to sit in judgment, and they want to decide. The people in the whole United States are beginning now to judge whether do we want Mr. Carter any longer in the office. That is the system of democracy. We've been brought up and we're living in a nation dedicated to the system of democracy. And the first thing you know, we go living that way in the church. You see, who is the one to judge whether I should continue in my job or not? I'm not elected by the people. None of you in this room, none of you listening to me that will be hearing this tape later, voted to put me into the office where I am. I'm not responsible to you. I'm responsible to the one who put me here, who is Jesus Christ. Now, is he on the job, or do you think that he needs your help? Maybe you say, well, Jesus Christ, I don't think you're doing your job very well. I'm going to take it over and do it in your place. I don't think you're judging Mr. Herbert Armstrong. I'm going to judge him. You see, some of them came to Moses back there. God, it was the same one who became Jesus Christ. He's God. And he had selected Moses, and he put Moses in the job where he was. But this Korah and his people came up and they said, Moses, why do you set yourself up and put yourself on such a high seat? Who do you think you are? And so they questioned him, and they were going to sit in judgment. Well, God just had the earth open up and swallow them. God was full of, God was, what's the word I want? He was angry, and he just simply did away with them. Now, they had been given a fairly high position in the work. They were men of renown, you know, if you go back there and read of it. But they weren't satisfied. They wanted a higher seat, and they wanted to blame Moses. So God took care of them. Well, God is my judge. And I tell you, I'm going to be judged with a whole lot greater judgment than the rest of the brethren, because God has given me a greater responsibility, and He's going to hold me more strictly accountable than He is the other brethren, and yet the other brethren want to sit back and judge some of them. Well, that's not what God has called the brethren to do. But with me, it's very small that I should be judged by you or by any human court. Here the people were sitting in the church were sitting in judgment of the Apostle Paul. I know what Paul meant, because I suffered the same thing. I do not even judge myself. I am not aware of anything against myself, but I am not thereby acquitted. It is the Lord who judges me. Therefore, do not pronounce judgment before the time, before the Lord comes, who will bring to light the things now hidden in darkness, and will disclose the purposes of the heart. God looks on the heart. Now, when the Lord comes, is He going to disclose that old King David of ancient Israel saw Bathsheba taking a bath and had her brought in and committed adultery with her, got her pregnant, and then had her husband killed so he could marry her? Is he going to bring up the fact that God told him, don't take a census and don't number Israel? And knowing that God said, don't do it, that David went ahead and did it anyway? No, I don't think when Christ comes in the judgment, He's going to bring that up against David at all. Do you know why? Because David has already repented of that, and Christ has already forgiven it. And Christ has come and took that penalty on Himself and died and paid the price for David. And it's all paid for. And there's no penalty hanging over David any longer from those two things. And God said, David is a man after my own heart. I won't say I've never committed sin. I'm human. I've committed sin, and so have every one of you. But when I have repented, and when God has forgiven it, and when Jesus came and gave and bled to death to pay for it, I don't have to pay for it all over again. So who's going to sit in judgment of me and say, well, I haven't done anything as bad as David did. I've never murdered anyone. I never got some other woman pregnant in my life either. I never did those things. I never did what God came and told me personally to my own face, don't do, and then I went ahead and did it. And David told his army general, go ahead and make this census, and his general said, oh, David, please don't do that. God said don't do it, and you're disobeying God. David said, I know, but you go do it anyhow. Who can do anything worse than that? I never have. Well, now, who's going to sit in judgment of me? What about that woman caught in adultery? Jesus forgave her. Now, are some of us going to condemn her when it comes up and she's resurrected in the judgment? I'm not. I'm not. She must have repented, or Jesus wouldn't have forgiven her. And Jesus said, just go and sin no more. I tell you, we need to realize these things. Then every man will receive his commendation from God. I have applied all this to myself and Apollos for your benefit, brethren, that you may learn by us not to go beyond what is written, that none of you may be puffed up in favor of one against another. And we've had some of that in the church too, one that's kind of all puffed up with one against another within the church, and we should not have any of that. For who sees anything different in you? What have you that you did not receive? If then you received it, why do you boast as if it were not a gift? You didn't produce it. Already you are filled. Already you have become rich. Without us you have become kings. And would that you did reign, so that we might share the rule with you. For I think that God has exhibited us apostles as last of all, like men sentenced to death, because we have become a spectacle to the world, to angels and to men. Makes me think that back in the days when I was with the Sardis Church up in Oregon, their ministers persecuted me. They considered I was the least of the ministers. I was the little tail end. They were ignorant men with practically no education. Only one among them had ever had any college education. He only had 1 year. And I know that I had more than the equivalent of a complete college education. I didn't get it that way, but nevertheless I got it the hard way. And I had it. I was the least of the ministers. And I have never considered, and I've never boasted of myself. Who of you has heard me say, I built this great work. I did this. Now, another man claimed he built this work, but he's not even in the church any longer. He didn't build it. Jesus Christ built it. Remember, some of us can do some planting and some watering, but we don't give the increase. We don't produce the growth God does. And we must remember that. We are fools for Christ's sake. That is, we appear as fools before the world because the truth of God is like foolishness to the world. Are we who are ministers, are we who have worked and studied the hard way and let God give us the truth and have gradually gotten that truth out to you, and all of the truth you have has come through, well, directly and indirectly, it all came through me. And then indirectly from me, but directly through some of the local ministers and pastors, you've received it through the ministry. But don't boast against the ministry as if the members are superior, because they are not.